I am N.S. Venkatraman. I am speaking on behalf of Nandini Voice for the Deprived, a non-governmental organization, not-for-profit organization based in Chennai in India. It is now necessary to recognize that India's population and growth in population in India is at an alarming level, and India cannot afford this scenario. Recently, the United Nations has brought out a report on the trends in the world population, where United Nations has predicted that India's population by the year 2050 would be as high as 166 crore. It has further said that India will outbeat China significantly in the level of population by 2050, whereas India's population in 2050 would be 166 crore. In the same year, 2050, China's population is likely to be only 131 crore. Now, next year, India will become the most populous country in the world. At present, India's population is around 17.5% of the world population. It's a very high level. And India's population density is also an unacceptable level. I'll give you a few examples. For example, India's present population density is 424 per square kilometer. Compare this with a few other prosperous countries. In the case of USA, its population density is only 36 per square kilometer, as against 424 per square kilometer in India. What a big difference. In the case of Russia, it is around only 9 per square kilometer. That is the population density. In the case of Australia, it is only 3 per square kilometer. That is the population density. Compare these figures with 424, that is the population density in India, then we will understand the seriousness and the alarming level of the situation. Certainly, India cannot afford this. Now, there are some people, considerable number of people in India, who seem to be of the view that population problem is not a big problem for India, and the population density and population growth will all settle down in the course of time, and India need not extremely concerned about the population growth and population density level. This is a very misleading conclusion. The argument of the people who are not in favor of drastic measures to reduce population growth can be summed up in one or two ways. For example, these people are of the view that India's population problem is India's problem. Why should the world be concerned about this? This is again totally a false view. Today, the world is virtually borderless. When the country's population density becomes as high as 424 per square kilometer that we have in India today, then you find a situation where the government of the country cannot afford to provide adequate job opportunities, adequate growth opportunities, adequate education for the citizens, because the economy is getting overstretched. In such circumstances, what happens is people in the overpopulated country tend to migrate to other countries where there is greater prosperity. You find this is already happening in India. Large number of Indians are going to Middle East countries, USA and Canada for jobs, seeking educational opportunities. And many of them, particularly to USA, Canada, or Western Europe and all this, don't come back. They settle down there. Now, what is happening here is, when so many people from one country, that highly populous country, go to another country, the demographic balance of those countries, destination countries, gets seriously disturbed. It's a matter of concern for them. For example, in recent last 3 or 4 years, huge number of people from Africa have descended to the Europe, and they've entered Europe through Greece, through Germany and all this as refugees. This has happened mainly because in their own native countries, the population density high, economic prosperity was not there, and the government has become oppressive due to the social tension, and they rush to the other countries. when they came in such thousands in number to Greece, through Greece, Germany, then Belgium, and all that, what happened was the governments of the several Western countries were compassionate and they thought they should be allowed. So they were all allowed. Now, today, what is happening here is there is a huge concern because of the unchecked influx of refugees into the Europe and the compassionate policy of the European government towards the refugees. The demographic balance of Europe has been significantly disturbed. Increasingly, riots are taking place, increasingly, violence are taking place, and increasingly, social disturbance are taking place in all the regions is a matter of very high concern. So let not anyone be under the impression that population density in one country is not a concern for others. It is when a country gets burdened with a huge population, it becomes the world burden. That's what we need to recognize, and what need to recognize in a responsible way in the India by Indians as well as the government of India. Now, another argument against the drastic measures to reduce population growth is some people are arguing that already population is declining in India. Fertility level are coming down. So the problem will get settled down by itself. This is again a very wrong view. We got a very high density of population, very huge population burden in India. Even if it settled down to a situation where every family is going to have only two children, still the population will be growing at an alarming level. What really happens here is happily there is improvement in medical science, medical technology, and lifespan of people are increasing. Now people live for more number of years, death rate are falling down. When death rate are falling down, birth rate is still maintained at level of 2 per birth, it is inevitable that the population with growth will go up. So we need to recognize here in this situation that even if two children per family is not good enough to control the population growth in India and avoid a burden of population density. Now, there is another argument that is being advanced by those who think drastic measures are not required is the economic growth, women enhancement, empowerment, and their educational opportunities will create a scenario where people will reduce the family size by themselves. No measures are required. Even Rajagopalachari, known as Rajaji, was one of the best brains in India they had, said in 1960s, no population drastic measures are required to control it. People will see the problem for themselves and then they will reduce the population. But in fact, with due respect to Rajaji's thoughts, this has not happened. So this is a situation that cannot be left to the people. This is a situation that cannot be left uncontrolled. So economic growth, population growth, economic growth will bring down the population growth, no doubt about it. But then will it happen at a pace, at a speed, at level which the country needs? It is not going to happen. Another argument of those who are against these family planning measures or that higher population means there is a demographic dividend. This is again a very misleading argument. See, demographic dividend will work when the population is at a reasonable level, number one, and the government of the day is able to provide enough opportunities to the people to acquire skill, to acquire education, promote industries, and promote employment opportunities. See, India has been recording significant growth in the last 8 or 9 years, there's no doubt about it. And GDP is reasonably steady, and per capita income is increasing. Still, this has not resulted in a situation where adequate skill level or educational opportunities have been provided to the people. So now what is happening here is when the population grows, the demographic dividend is good enough only in theory, not in practice, because the government cannot afford to impart necessary skill to the people because of the high population. Then in that case, what really happens is it's not a case of demographic dividend, it is a case of demographic drag. That is what is going to happen in India. That is already happening in India. Now, another argument that is being advanced by the people against this population growth is coercive methods should be avoided. I agree with that. Coercive methods should be avoided. For example, during this national emergency, when with great enthusiasm, government of India started some sort of coercive methods to reduce the population. Compulsory sterilization was carried out in particularly some states in northern India, which was heavily resented by the people. Nobody liked it. Then what happens after this emergency was over, when the particular government which was in power contested the election, it lost the election. So many people gave the interpretation that the government lost the power mainly because of the coercive methods adopted by the population growth. That could be partly true, though there could also be some other reason. So immediately what has happened after the emergency, the efforts towards population control has slackened. Before the emergency period, immediately after independence from India, there have been a lot of emphasis on population growth, a lot of campaign against the population growth was done. But after the national emergency, after revoking the national emergency, when subsequent governments came into power, they realized or they wrongly thought that population control is a very sensitive issue. It will make them people listen. They will lose the vote, votes among the people. So government started paying lesser attention to the population control. This is a very tragic development, a negative development that has taken place. Now let us look into this present government. See, our Prime Minister Modi assumed office in 2014. The last 8 years or so, he has made country has made substantial improvement in economic growth, industrial growth, even in social growth. And Prime Minister is particularly emphasizing on varieties of human building up of the human efforts as well as the human quality. So Prime Minister has been emphasizing on Clean India campaign. He has been emphasizing on yoga culture. These are all very excellent strategies. But then Prime Minister talks about the yoga culture. Prime Minister talks about this Clean India campaign at every opportunity. But what is conspicuous is our Prime Minister is not speaking about the population need for population control with the same emphasis. He speaks occasionally on population growth and the issues out of population growth, but never emphasizes or never given the thrust and focus that is giving to other issues like yoga culture or Clean India campaign. This is something very a matter of very concern, probably because of the lack of focus on the population control by the Prime Minister in the last 8 years. The population control measures in India has slackened to some extent. Now, given this scenario, given the alarming rate of population level in the country at growth level, India has no alternative other than going for one child norm for family. Have one child norm for family. Again, there are a lot of critics for this policy also. People point out the example of China, where China came down with a one child policy. They implemented the policy with all the draconian measures that China's government is capable of, and one child policy became the normal of the day. Then what happened was the elderly population increased. And then China not hastily, after doing it for some years, China reversed its policy, and now one child norm policy is no more there in China. So the critics of the one child policy say, look at the example of China, it was a disaster. Should we repeat this disaster in India after seeing the China? What we need to keep in mind here is, by the one child policy, China has controlled the population growth and brought down to a reasonable level so that by 2050, China's population is going to only 131 crore, as against India's population of 166 crore, as predicted by the United Nations. So we need to go for the one-child policy, go for nearly 20 years, 30 years. When it reaches a certain level, then possibly we can reverse the idea. That should happen. That is possible given the human nature. Then another argument that is given against this one-child family policy is that from the religious people. There are certain religions who say that family control measures should not be done. Family size should not be controlled. They are opposing abortion. These are all very negative way of looking at it. No religious text has said, no religious scriptures have said against small families. No, they have not been totally silent about it. These are all the issues that are being created by the so-called interpreters of religious doctrine for some ulterior reasons or vested reasons. This argument of religious groups that family size should not be controlled should be rejected by the government with the contempt that it deserves. Another big issue in the controlling this population growth is the practice of polygamy. There are certain rules in India already where polygamy is banned, but this is more violated than practiced. Several politicians in India who are legislators, who are parliamentarians, who are ministers have more than one woman as a wife. 2, 3 is very, very common. And many times they declare only one woman as a wife and announce the children for the one woman again as the children. Others are not given the publicity, but they are very much there. So this practice has to be put down. See, this practice of polygamy, which possibly being justified by some religion, have to be discouraged. Government has come with a strict policy, whatever the name it calls, that every man should have only one wife. It is a decent way of living, a civilized way of living, and a progressive way of living. The government has to say this. Now, next problem is, should family control measures has been done in a coercive way? Certainly, it should not be done in a coercive way. It should be done by a persuasion. See, for example, the experience of emergency when compulsory sterilization was done was disastrous. That should never be done. Then how to do it? Go by a persuasion, go by a campaign, and to speed up the whole process, go for disincentives. Go for disincentives for large family. Some governments have taken some steps. Assam government has taken some steps. They have said if family has more than two children, probably government job will be denied. Some sort of a disincentives have to be done. And a feeling has to come into society. Having more than two children or even more than one child could be an anti-national activity the parents should realize, family should realize. See, nothing wrong if you want to have a larger family. But then if it is going to be in conflict with the national interest, you are adding to the burden of the population of the country, you are not helping the cause. So people should voluntarily accept that one child norm is necessary, the civilized way to ensure that India will progress. Now there are two states in the country. One is Uttar Pradesh, another is Bihar, where population density is very high. Population growth in these two states are much higher than the population growth in other states like Kerala or Tamil Nadu. Obviously, some special focus and special policy have to be introduced for the two states. Finally, as I told you before, earlier, immediately after independence, there was a separate ministry in the government of India for population control. There was a separate population minister was there. That practice has been given up. Immediately, the government of India should constitute a separate ministry for population control, give me a target, and ensure that the minister takes charge of these population control measures, not only at the central level, but also at the state level. It is very, very important. Finally, I'll just, by way of conclusion, I'll just one word. Even if India is going to be having a zero population growth, which is very, very unlikely, even if India is like to go with zero population, still India will be the most populous country in the world. Still India's population density is very, very high, beyond acceptable level. This shows the seriousness of the situation. So the discussion on the need for controlling the population growth should not be grouped as an emotive issue, should not be seen as a religious issue, should be seen as a national cause, necessary, and a highly populated density in India, high population growth in India is, to put it shortly, an embarrassment for the world. India should be a cause for embarrassment by continuing to have such high population density and high population burden. Thank you very much.